Last summer, the murder of George Floyd by former officer Derek Chauvin provoked worldwide demonstrations. In D.C., thousands took to the streets chanting Black Lives Matter. A year later, we're learning more about the role the federal government played in prosecuting activists involved in those demonstrations. The Movement for Black Lives just released a 60-page report. It finds that as demonstrations grew, so did police presence. The report says BLM protesters often had federal charges filed against them, even when there were comparable state charges. The authors call this a deliberate effort to disrupt the movement. This weekend, we will see more marching in D.C., this time focused on voting rights. The Brennan Center for Justice says that between January the 1st and July of this year, 18 states have enacted 30 laws to restrict access to voting. These laws make mail-in and early voting more difficult, add harsher voter ID requirements, and make faulty voter purges more likely. Joining us right now is Dr. Rashawn Ray. He's a professor at the University of Maryland. He's here with us discussing the Voting Rights March on Saturday and that report from Movement for Black Lives. Good to see you, Dr. Ray. How are you?
I'm good. So glad to be with you.
Oh, we appreciate it. So let's talk about the March 1st, since that's coming up on Saturday. There is a clear push right now to restrict voting access nationally. We have seen already some laws passed regarding that. In terms of this march itself, what role do you think it will play in at least trying to shift the narrative, so to speak, about the necessity for expanding voting rights?
Well, I think the march will continue to highlight the need for equitable voting rights and also continue to put a spotlight on policing and unfair discriminatory practices. I think part of what the march is aiming to do is to keep these issues in the public eye. We know that as COVID has spiked again and that people are paying attention to children going back to school and debates about critical race theory in schools, which is something that's kind of tangentially related to this. What they're trying to say is, here are the core issues. This is about racism and racial discrimination, and we need to focus in all of its forms, from voting to criminal justice reform.
It's interesting because Republican legislatures that have at least already passed some of these laws have said that there is a need to make sure that our voting process is protected and that it is seen in high regard. Has there been any indication, based on what you know, that potentially these laws that have passed could potentially have a negative effect on Republicans that have passed these laws?
Yes, most definitely. What's interesting about restrictive voting laws is that they not only impact people who vote Democrat or people who are liberals or people who are progressives, but all Americans. And this is one of the things that people have been arguing for, whether that be people who are coming to this march, all the way to people in Congress who are advocating for these policies. There's one key stat that people need to know about why some Republicans are pushing for this. When voter turnout is high, like we saw in the 2020 election, typically Democrats win. When voter turnout is low, typically Republicans win, even if that means restricting some of their own voters from coming out to vote in various states around the country. So they know these patterns. The public is starting to better understand these patterns. The bottom line, though, is that the more people who vote, the more people who can equitably access the polls, that is good for our democracy.
Lastly, for you, that report from Movement for Black Lives talks specifically about how the federal government targeted activists that participated in demonstrations last month, but trying to tack on federal charges when there were already comparable state charges involved in some of these cases. Your thoughts about their allegations that the federal government was targeting activists last summer?
Well, I think the findings are pretty compelling, and I think they're right in line with what we know historically about different types of protest. All we have to do is compare what has happened to protesters for Black Lives Matter who were at the Capitol compared to individuals who stormed the Capitol on January 6th of this year. When we make that comparison, we see something that is highlighted in literature, that if you're protesting for racial justice, oftentimes your sanctions are going to be more severe. And if you're oftentimes protesting for alt-right policies, even individuals who are white supremacists and white nationalists, oftentimes the sanctions are less severe. So this report highlights that. Academic research further shows this, and it is something that needs to be addressed when we start talking about federal and state charges. And again, one thing the report did in its conclusion is say, look, these are still the things that have not happened. Voting, dealing with policing and criminal justice reform, and then also dealing with reparations are also still on the table.
A lot to consider. Dr. Ray, professor of sociology at the University of Maryland. Thank you for your time, sir, and be well.